So, first book that I read in February was Down and Across by Arvind Ahmadi. This I got as a review copy from Penguin Teen, and I was super excited because it's my first ever review copy. This book is about a young boy named Saqib Ferdowsi who goes by Scott. He is an Iranian-American kid, and he is in between his junior and senior years in high school. His parents are very much on his ass about figuring out his future career or being committed to what he wants to do, but Saqib, like every other high schooler, is floundering, and there's nothing fucking wrong with that. So his parents leave to go to Iran, and he's left alone to do his internship. And on a whim, this boy decides to quit and go down to DC and try and meet the author of these lectures and books about grit. And Saqib discovers that he wants to pursue grit and understand what he needs, try and figure out what he needs to do to become a more gritty person, more passionate person, and a more committed person. And his life kind of takes off in this 2-week span where he's not living at home, where he's essentially run away from home. Gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It was just unbelievably amazing. I did think that the book fell a little bit into the trope of a manic pixie dream girl, but it was done so in a very self-conscious, I know I'm writing a manic pixie dream girl into this book manner. And I thought that was just a really interesting conflict to see in the writing style itself. But it did lend to the story a great deal. I really, really liked how it was executed. It's just so lighthearted, and the message is just so perfect, because I, as someone graduating college, kind of need that. That message is definitely applicable to anyone of any age. You don't have to be 30 and know exactly what the heck you're doing. I low-key don't know what I'm doing, and this book just let me feel a little bit better about being in the dark about where I am in my life. It's just so great, not to mention the representation. It's so well done. I really loved it, and this is Arvind Ahmadi's debut book, so for a first book, it's just fantastic. I loved it, and I think everyone should read it. The next book that I read in February is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakrabarti. I have family members with a similar last name. S.A. Chakrabarti's name is with a B. My family members are like Chakrabarti with a V. So, don't exactly know how she pronounces it. I think she's also a practicing Muslim, so there's definitely differences there, so don't take my pronunciation for it. Cultural differences are probably going to definitely affect the way her name is said. About the City of Brass. This book is a fantasy set in the Middle East. It's inspired by a lot of Islamic fairy tales and legends, and it's based on the story of Devabad. S.A. Chakrabarti on her Twitter has a whole thread of her shorthand retelling of the origin tale of Devabad. So if you want to know what that is, I'll try and find her tweets and link it down below. The City of Brass is about a young girl named Nehri. She's grown up on the streets. She is a thief, a con artist, but she also has powers. She is able to understand and pick up any language, and she's been able to do that since a very young age, and she's also been able to heal people really easily. These are powers that she's known she's had, but she doesn't know where she gets them from. They're things she conceals, but also uses to her advantage as a con artist. Then one day, as she's performing one of her healing rituals, she sets loose a deva, and he whisks her away on this kidnapping / protect her journey as other people try to attack her and kill her, and they travel to the city of Devabad, where the deva is from and where supposedly her magic can be explained. It's a really large book. I listened to this one on audiobook as well, and it's giant. It felt giant even as an audiobook, which I read on double time. So it's just exorbitantly long. A lot of people who read it in text, at least the reviews that I've seen, have said that it gets really slow in the middle. I didn't feel that in the audiobook, which I think is an asset to the audiobook experience as opposed to the hard copy experience. So if you're not one to like very intense and high fantasy books, you do want to read diverse fantasies, I suggest picking up the audiobook for this one. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's not that I disliked it. I think 3 out of 5 stars is like an average book. I thought it was an average book. It was excellent in terms of world building, in terms of representation, just in terms of like how the idea of this book was. I really, really enjoyed it. Only problem I had with the series was the romance. I thought it was a little weird, a little off-kilter, and like it felt wrong to what was happening otherwise in this book. I mean, I'm not one to say that romances can't happen during times of intense political upheaval, but it just derailed focus so much from this conflict that was going on in this story that I thought was significantly more interesting than that stupid romance that like it just took the focus away from me a lot. But I will say that the romance definitely offset how dry potentially the audiobook could have been if it were just about the politics. But I never really got bored when they were talking about politics. Another thing I will say is that in my audiobooking experience of this, there were a lot of times where I could not keep track of what was going on. I think in this case, if I had the physical copy, I would have been able to retain a lot of the words. I'm familiar with a lot of the terminology because words in Arabic and Farsi tend to cross over a lot with words in Hindi and Urdu and Marathi as well, and Sanskrit actually. So the word overlap was similar and I could keep track of a majority of the terms, but there were just so many definitions and different words to describe one single thing that like those things I couldn't keep track of. Sometimes they'd switch up using one or the other, and I didn't know who or what they were referring to, which is really confusing, but it would have been extremely handy to have the glossary at the end with me to refer back to. And I think that's the only downside to the audiobook, is not having that glossary with you, which means you would definitely have to slow down the pace of reading if you want to know word for word what they're saying. Audiobook narrator was also like a little bit on the shaky grounds. She is a brown audiobook narrator. She's half Indian, half Ghanaian. And so this Middle Eastern fantasy novel is not narrated by a white person, and I respect that. But the narrator did end up switching accents a little bit weirdly. She knew how to pronounce everything perfectly. When she was talking fast and like was using emotions in her speech, she'd slip up on a lot of the pronunciations, and that just got to me a little bit more than it usually would. I'm just a little bit more sensitive to things like that, and it's just something that I've become attuned to. It probably won't be much of an issue for most readers. It's just me. I'm just a little bit hypersensitive to these kinds of things. Overall, it was a decent book. I really can't wait to get my hands on the next one. It's an exquisite and really, really intriguing fantasy. I hope the next book gets significantly better and this stupid romance plot just gets chucked out of the waters. Don't think it'll happen, but I could hold out hope. Really excited to get my hands on the next book, and it's good. It's very good, and it's diverse, and that's just something I really, really appreciated about it. The next book that I've read in February was Sight Witch by Susan Dennard. This is a novella that follows up Wind Witch. It's like third book released, but like in terms of plotline, it's like 2.5 in the Witchland series. I freaking love the Witchland series so much. Premise of the Witchland series, we're set in the world called the Witchlands, and people have powers to control elements. The first book follows one of her main characters, Safiya, who is a truth witch, and she's the only one in existence. She's able to tell truths and lies innately due to her powers. And as she gets sold off to someone in marriage, the two of them run away, and it becomes an adventure. Lots of politics, super intense fantasy. Sight Witch, which is a prequel to Truth Witch, so it happens about a year before Truth Witch, but like in terms of understanding of the narrative, read it definitely after Wind Witch and before Blood Witch. Sight Witch is about Ryber. She's a side character in Truth Witch, and Ryber's becoming of a Sight Witch. Again, like there's like this gray line of spoilers for Truth Witch and Wind Witch as well, that I don't want to give away, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. certainly if you've read Truth Witch and Wind Witch, I suggest you read Sight Witch because it does a lot for the series. It is so, so good. I actually got to meet Susan Dennard when she came to my local indie bookstore for a signing, and she's just the loveliest person ever. Before going, she had this story up on her Instagram about realizing the appropriations and the mistakes in terms of race presentation that she's had in her books, and that's kind of the best things you could get out of a white author is them looking back on their career and realizing the mistakes that they've made in past books and working towards fixing that in future books. She's just, I think, one of the most aware white authors that I've actually read books of, and it's just so refreshing and so lovely. She's such a pleasant person to be around. She's so honest and earnest, and I really love Susan Dennard. I love this book too. Sight Witch got a 5 out of 5 stars for me. Truth Witch was like a 4 out of 5 stars. Wind Witch, certainly 5 out of 5 stars. Again, another one of those epic fantasy series that I recommend for everyone. It is just so good, so beautifully paced, just so good. Next book that I read in February was Hope Nation by Dr. Rose Brock. I've done a blog tour review for Hope Nation, so I'll attach that one down below as well. I got this one as well as a finished but advanced copy of the book, and it's just the greatest thing to have received, especially in this time period. Hope Nation is an anthology of essays and short stories by a lot of big-name authors on the topic of hope in their lives, through their advice and through their anecdotes. It's just so timely, I thought. I've literally said the same thing in that video as well. If you want to know exactly what I think about it, go watch it. I didn't actually finish the entire book. I haven't read the entirety of the anthology. I read the authors that I most wanted to, and that's about 50% of the book, and I kind of tabled it at that because it certainly is a very overwhelming experience to read all of them at once. They're very hefty stories. They're a lot to digest all at once. On Goodreads, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because I read only half and I didn't feel motivated to read the rest, but every single story I read that far is a 5 out of 5 stars. Again, we'll link it down below if you want to know exactly what the heck I'm talking about. Second to last book that I read in February is Everless by Sarah Holland. I gave this book a 2.5 stars out of 5, I think. I just wasn't very taken with it. The book is set in a world where time is currency, literally. People bleed themselves out, so trigger warning for self-harm. People bleed themselves out to give away time as money to get wares and, just live. And our main character, Jules, is one of the poor people who lives in the district that is associated with a certain royals. Don't care to remember the names of them. And she has to go work in the household of the royals despite having ran away in the past due to business that happened. So, against her father's wishes, she chooses to go work at the royal family's house to earn money so that her father doesn't kill himself, bleeding himself dry. And as she works there, she realizes the people she thought she knew from her past life weren't exactly who they were. And what she thought she knew were facts about her own life were starting to turn out to be very, very different. The book opened so similarly to Red Queen. I thought I was reading the same book with time as opposed to Silver Blood business. It was so similar that I was just pissed off the entire time. I will say that the tropes did not play out the exact same way that they did in Red Queen, and she definitely gave some unexpected twists. I could tell that this was gonna be the plot twist. This is how it's gonna probably play out, and then it played out at the end of the book that exact way. Like, I don't like that much predictability in the book. Also, the book focused very much on romance than it did on the intrigue of her own past life, which I thought was significantly more interesting than the frickin' romance was. And a lot of the twists and blindsides that happened came so late in the game. There was almost zero setup for it. The unexpected plot twist that came just came immediately after another plot twist, there was no time to process, there was no time to appreciate the plot twist, that it just kind of felt like one slam after another, to the point where you were numb to this unexpected new thing that was coming. So I really didn't like it. Even if something did surprise me, it didn't surprise me because I knew there was another surprise coming. Like, it was just, I thought, badly paced. Like, my main issue with this book is literally the pacing. I will say that it's not a terrible book. I was just generally annoyed with it, and I think if I maybe was in a better mood and did not see the parallels to Red Queen, I might have appreciated it better. I don't think I'm going to continue on with this series. I don't really care to know, and I think I already know how it's going to play out. So I'll read a summary when that comes out, and I'll see if it's what it is. Last book that I read in February, which I literally finished at 2 a.m. on March 1st, is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This was a reread, and I freaking love this book! I am so excited for the movie. It literally comes out in 2 weeks, and it's just the best. For those of you who don't know, this book is about Simon, who is in a correspondence with someone that he met online. Simon is a gay-closeted teenager, but he gets blackmailed by a fellow classmate who finds out these emails. And so Simon is trying to navigate this world where, although most people are comfortable with gay people, he's living in a southern state, but he himself is not ready to come out yet, and it's just this struggle of trying to be who he is, trying to live his life with his new and old friends, just exist with his family, and also figure out what to do with this stupid kid who's blackmailing him. I really, really loved this book. The first time I read it was an audiobook last year, and when I opened up this book, I felt like I remembered nothing. I read the first line and I was like, where are the first 20 pages of this? But then I realized that that is exactly how it started. Like, the more I read, the more came back to me, but I forgot who the email correspondence was, I forgot who ended up with who, I forgot the family conflict, I literally forgot everything. I'm glad I bought the book, and I'm glad I reread it. I'm buddy reading it with a friend, so if she watches this and realizes that I finished the book in the day when she had just started it, she's gonna be really upset with me. I hope to do like a talk through buddy review video with her after we both watch the movie. We'll see if that actually happens. Rating for Simon and the Homo Sapiens. First time around I gave it a 5 out of 5. This time I actually gave it a 4 out of 5. I did pick up on a couple of issues in the book in terms of like just how the main character and Becky talk about other queer orientations, like lesbians. There's one line that really kind of annoyed me. Yeah, like those kinds of things I think for me end up warranting a whole point as opposed to just a partial point. But it's still a great book. I really, really love it, and I can't wait for the movie. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna go turn the AC in this apartment back now and curl up. Bye.